Good morning. So welcome to TLDC this morning. I will give you a quick notice real quickly in case I drop off. It's because I'm conserving bandwidth for our guests. And I definitely will interact with you guys in the chat box. Hi, Kara, how are you? So good morning, everybody. And as we know, sometimes our platform gives us fits. So in the interest of conserving bandwidth, I may just be the moderator in chat. So I am super excited today to have my guests. So just kind of a quick background. My own business has been doing some work in competency modeling and job architectures, which when I first encountered it, I'm like, what's that? I really didn't know what it was, how it can benefit the business, how to implement it across the business. And I still don't know as much about it as I'd like to know. And again, it's a topic of interest that I think a lot of us in our group may not really know that much about as well. Although, I mean, it directly touches learning and development. I mean, it gets implemented across our units. So I think it's a really important topic. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today because I have two fabulous guests. And so I will speak first a little bit about the business impacts and then also talk about implementation of it. So let me introduce my guests. And so ordinarily in our playlist, oftentimes we'll split it into two, but we're going to go ahead and we've got both guests in the window with us today, which is super cool because they can talk to each other and you guys can ask questions. So we have Rachel Weiss, and Rachel's a customer-obsessed L&D superstar. I love that, with a strong track record of creating and implementing large-scale training programs worldwide, from strategy to execution management. She's recognized for sharing best practices and driving high performance with partners around the globe. So welcome, Rachel. We're really glad to have you.
Thanks.
And hang on a second here. I'm looking for all of the rest of my notes. We also have Erin, and Erin Melvin is actually, she's more focused on the implementation of systems and platforms across businesses. And so she has a specialty in working with folks to take the competency modeling and job architectures and spread those across the LMS and HRIS platforms that we all work with every day. So super cool. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you.
If somebody wants to tell me in chat if they can hear me, then we're all good. Echo. Thanks, Molly. Yay. Echo. So I'll go on silent so you guys don't hear that. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and let Rachel start. And if you guys, I have to refresh and jump back in, you'll know what's happening. But my guests, I think, are all good. So Rachel, I'll let you go ahead.
Great. So, hey, it's really nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Talking a little bit about competency models and how they benefit the business. And so I'll keep an eye on the chat window, and Toddi, you can let me know too if there are any specific questions. Otherwise, I am just going to talk about what they are and why we use them. So ultimately, I hope we didn't just lose Toddi. Okay, so ultimately, when we think about jobs, the competency model is not anything new, and it's not anything necessarily groundbreaking. If you think about it, it really is kind of more common sense. Looking at what, very specifically, what does this business need? I think that when we talk about job descriptions and whatnot in different businesses, there's a lot of overlap and a lot of kind of generic language that happens. And if you look at a specific business when it comes to competency modeling, it's really looking at what does this business need to be successul. And so it's taking, there are a lot of ways to do it. There's some really long drawn out ways, which are, if a business has the time, it's very valuable. But oftentimes in our crazy world, the business won't have the time, to spend, say, 9 months to a year really digging into every piece of it. And so sometimes there's got to be a little bit of a more rapid version that's done. But ultimately, the main focus for this is really taking a look at what are the most important success indicators for the business? Where can we look at what people do that moves the business forward in different job function areas? And so thinking about what I like to talk about with competencies is really looking at workers in the business as whole people. So that, instead of being able to say, you need to do this job function, this one thing, we need someone who knows how to do this X, Y, and Z, whatever functional, pieces you need for that business, really looking more at a whole person. It's my philosophy anyway, and I think many others, is that, we can train people on the functional aspect of doing the work for the business. But there are some things, some ways of being, I guess, if you think about these competency models, things like, communication, which there can be some training for that. But the way we deal with conflict, does somebody look at conflict as a healthy indicator of, thought going on for the work, or is it something that people shy away from? There's not going to be growth without conflict. We know that. That's how all good stories are, right? Something has to happen to move it along. So, ultimately, it's looking at, I've said ultimately a lot, I'll try to stop that. It's really looking at what does the business need, and who are the types of people who are going to be most successful in the organization. So successful themselves for that development, but also obviously successful to move the business forward. So that's kind of general. Let's see, I do see a question. Methodology for creating a competency model. So that's a great question. And I will say that my expertise really comes in the L&D piece of it, of when I've worked with competency models before, the HR aspect of the business has really put that piece together. And my focus is then on the training component of it. I know that there are many different types of competency models out there. And so I've seen different ones being used, but I don't have one that I particularly use, because I tend to come in after that's been done and map out the L&D pieces of it. So not a great answer, because I don't have a good answer for it. That's where I fit in. Okay, so Toddi, I don't know if you're still around, if there are other questions. I can keep going.
Okay, yes, I'm definitely here. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. So we talked a little bit about, like what it does for the business and kind of the things that you do. How do we start with this whole process? So one of the things that I have had experience with is I work with a group that about just, kind of for instance, we have roughly around 4,000 employees. We have around 3,000 job titles, which, that's crazy. So, what's wrong with that? Why is it okay to have 3,000 job titles? Why do we want to fine tune down in our organization what our job titles look like, and then to be able to align competencies that are very specifically associated with those? So would you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. And it's a great question, because I think if we look at, if we think about job, like career movement in the past, oftentimes people really think like, if you're not moving up, you're not moving. And I think that we've really gotten, in modern day workplaces, we've gotten past that. You see a lot of benefits to working with different departments, to moving laterally. So if I think about a company with, I think you said like 3,000 or 4,000 people and almost as many job titles, first off, I would say it clearly just dilutes what that job title means. And I would also argue that the more specific we get with job titles, it's actually almost less descriptive of what they're doing. Because the job title that's super focused like that is really, in my mind, I think, focused around doing particular tasks. And competency modeling is really moving away from like very specific tasks into more, how do you approach the work? What do you need to do? What makes you successful? And so I think that if I think about the new, like in my mind, a newer way of business where, for example, here, we've got a lot of moves that could be considered lateral, but in my mind, they're not, because, if you look at the job function or a job title, they're somewhat lateral, but the person going into that job is learning all new skill sets, all new tasks, different technology, all sorts of stuff. And so I think the benefit to having really clearer and I wouldn't necessarily say broader, but having a list of job titles that can kind of move throughout the business gives that flexibility and understanding of who can do what. So that if in my department, if I want to start utilizing some subject matter experts or bring in some people into my department who are going to really elevate our knowledge, our practices, some of the things that we do, I want to know where they're already functioning in the department that they're in. So having those more general job titles, not having as many job titles as you have people, to really just dilute the meaning of them, allows us all to understand where people are. That's one of the things I really like about competency models, is that, you can build the leveling within each competency framework, so to speak, but it should be something that can be moved around the business, because the business as a whole has said, these are the things that are important to us. For us to keep moving forward, we need to know that we have the right people in the right places, and they've got the right skill sets and abilities to be successful in the business environment that we've created here. I don't know if that answers the question. I'm a little bit of a rambler in the morning, so I apologize that this is a morning cast.
Excellent. So, I mean, just, part of what we do, a lot of what we do is we talk, stream of thought, because we come here as experts. So totally fine. Trust me, we all do this.
Okay.
And I think it's really important, because you'll have a thought and you're like, wait a minute, I got to circle back to that. So, all good.
And I saw Kara's question. Yes, ultimately that's it. I have been involved with that work of helping the HR teams putting those things together, but ultimately it's, what does this mean from an L&D perspective for the business?
Yeah, and actually, what my experience is that it's normally initiated by like the talent development groups, which are usually housed in HR, but it translates to talent management, talent acquisition, especially talent acquisition, things like level setting pay, which I think is really interesting. And so kind of the trickle down effect of what happens when you perform a job architecture, I think is really fascinating. And I mean, I'm just kind of enamored by it, actually. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a big piece of it is, I like the fact that you talk about not being specifically task-based, but what does it take to get not just your job done, but the job of the team done? So that's pretty interesting stuff. I'll let you go on.
Sure. Yeah. And I noticed another question here about what makes a framework. And that is a good question. So framework, in my mind, is really all of the pieces that you're going to need to have in place to be able to move forward successfully with the competency model that you put together. So if we think about that, obviously things like, mapping out job roles and that kind of stuff is important. But there's a lot of other pieces that come in more on the HR side, but also for L&D in terms of, training expectations. What's the support that you're going to give people in these roles? What does compensation look like? If you've got a competency model, what do we reward? How do we determine success? All of these things, these behaviors that are required and rewarded from the business for doing good work. All of those things have to come into that framework. So it's really being able to create a roadmap to say, this is what makes the business successful. Here's how we're going to keep everybody kind of corralled into that successful space. And here's how we're going to continue to move them forward within that successful space. Because ultimately, if we're not successful within the business, we're not moving the business forward. And I think it also really does create an energy and a space for people to be happier and more comfortable at work, because it is much clearer what is expected of you. If I think about job descriptions, a lot of times it's really focused on, these are the skills you need and the things you need to do to get this job done. But it doesn't necessarily tell me how I'm going to be successful in the business as a whole, because I would love to have someone who has amazing skills and is really just, a shining star with the tasks that they complete. But if they're not connected in with the mission and the vision of the business, if they're not connected in with our department and what we feel is success, to be very honest, I don't want that person. The task and the skills is not enough. It feels a little 21st century to me, to say this, but like really looking at that whole person in the workplace. Are you dialed in to what is going to move the business forward? And I think that's, thinking about L&D as strategic partnerships. Yes, I know we've been in the 21st century for 19 years now. Thank you. I just dated myself. But so fair point. Okay. Okay, lost my train of thought, but I see another question, so I'm just going to jump in on that. So Jack says, how do I start creating a framework if there's nothing in place currently? Great question. So to get started, I can tell you that it really looks like, again, the what you do is going to depend on how much time you have on the top priorities of the business and whatnot. But if we're looking at creating that framework, I would say starting with high performers within the business. What are they, it could be interviewing them, shadowing them, looking at the results of their work, but really looking at what are the high performers, what competencies do they exhibit consistently, as well as what is most important for your business, because there are a ton of competencies. I mean, if you think about like Lominger, they identified 67 things. Well, I'm not going to make a competency framework for 67 competencies. That's really excessive. I think one place to start, if you're looking for thinking about how to start, would be looking at those Lominger competencies and picking, say, 10, 12, 8, what are your top needs for the business right now? And I think the right now is important as well, because I would not recommend building a competency framework and then, that's what we use for the next 20 years. Obviously, this is something that is going to shift as the business shifts. Even when I think about past roles I've had I was the last place I worked, I was there 5 years. And the L&D, the competencies, the business in 5 years really shifted a lot. I'm seeing that where I am now as well. So it's something that you have to continually, I would say every 6 months you're taking a peek, but really every year, does this still describe who we are? So I would start with some of those basic competencies that have already been identified as success indicators for business, and then looking at which are the ones that are most key right now to move the business forward from where it is right now to where you've identified you might want to be. And looking at too, when you think about the workforce, what are the strengths and what are the biggest areas of opportunity, and determining where you want to make that movement, because it's important to be able to really say, yes, this is what success looks like, the opposite. This is what we're seeing now, and this is what we want to move toward. But I think rewarding what works really well is important too. And so thinking about what is going to be most important for the business in that time. I see that I get sidetracked by these. I see that Daniel had said at Apple, they did case studies to understand those competencies that most successful managers had in common. I think that's a really great way to start. I agree with Kara that those can often take a ton of time. If you don't have that time though, even just looking at doing some roundtables with your team and figuring out in a quicker and casual way, but being able to see what are some of those things. I see other stuff people are mentioning here. Totally throwing me off. And you just put my hand up on that side. Okay. Anyway, I've talked a lot. I don't know if there are other questions we have or if we want to engage with Erin as well.
I wouldn't mind just saying a couple of things to that, because one of the things that, so I don't develop the competencies either, but I work with companies that do. And quite often what they'll do, and I see this is very, very common, is they'll hire a competency consultant. And so I see some people on the board that say have they're certified in these sort of methodologies, and they'll go and find somebody who's done that and bring them on for the building of it. Because for somebody who's outside of it to start doing that is kind of a big task to sort of learn it, and it'd be probably easy to get into the weeds, and then you're in this like really complex thing, and it could be really overwhelming. So if you have somebody from an external place, and a lot of the people that I work with is either health and safety or an occupation industry, and so they'll need something in that realm. So hiring somebody to help you do that is really useful. And also, I think to tag into what Rachel was saying, I think it's really important to talk to the people. I know that's really time consuming, but the advice that I keep coming up with over and over again is go talk to the stakeholders, go talk to the people who are doing the job. And as Rachel said, the high performer. So you want the people who are, you want to mirror that more. So you want to find out what they're doing, but you need buy-in from the people as well. And so the way to get that buy-in and the desire to aspire to train into those competencies, then you need to ask them what they want as well. And the business, so in the business role. So there's a lot of people to talk to ensure that you're getting this going correctly. So yeah, I agree with what I see here.
Yeah, so I think it's a really key thing that we should understand, because it's a monstrous sized project for any organization to undertake. And the point at which you start to create this framework is, like literally, as you say, getting the buy-in of the business and talking to the experts and whatnot. So, how do we kind of define the start of that framework? I saw that was one of our questions on there too, is, what really makes up that framework? Like, how, kind of from a mechanic standpoint, how are we going about doing this? I think that's one of the things that seems, well, Kara called it a dark art, which is probably true, but how do we do that? I just, aside from having those conversations, how does that get lined out?
Okay, so I think that for me, as I said, I have not been the one who has who was building it. I have been involved in it. For me, it's more, my role is more around looking at the leveling aspect of the competencies. And so that actually kind of connects in with a question I saw here from Eileen about measuring success against the rubric. I think that, what I would recommend, it sounds like actually we've got people on the chat who have more experience with actually starting to build this than I do. So keep me honest here. But I think that, again, figuring out, so looking at those competencies, I think the first step is, to Erin's point, is just talking to the people, just saying, finding what is success, who are those top performers then that map out against what we consider success to be, and asking them a ton of questions, getting into how do they deal with things, how do they respond to things, what are their thoughts about certain scenarios, so that you can really map out looking at this really long list of competencies to say, okay, what are the top ones that are the most important to move our business forward, and then from there, I think it's looking at, if we're talking about a true framework, does our L&D align with that? If we're saying that these are the top competencies as a business, are we developing people that way? If we say as a business we want these types of people, but our L&D efforts don't mirror that, it's a kind of a little bit of a disaster. What's going to happen there? We're not actually setting people up for success, or really showing people that there's a pathway to success, that you don't have to come in with everything. We're going to help, right? So my focus is really more on that L&D piece. So I would certainly make sure that L&D matches, or supports at least, what you've said is the most important business competencies for these roles. And then I would look at the reward structure. We say that these are the things that we value the most. Does our reward structure mirror that as well? I think a lot of the concept of the framework is really just making sure that all of your ducks are in a row, that all of everything lines up to create one very clear path forward towards success. Yeah.
And, I'll add something to that as well, too, is competency framework, and in the way I think we're talking about it here, is is a company culture that you're building. I really see it as kind of a backbone. And earlier, Toddi was saying, like, the more I think about this and talk about it, the more I like it because it's exciting. And you're building a structure for your company that's either leadership. This is how our leaders are. And this is how you are in this role. So you might have a leadership competency set. You may have a technical competency. So each role has specific jobs or tasks or skills that they need to do. And so you're building that into the company, and then it becomes a mode of communication either between employee and manager, but also between like recruitment. So we were talking about that earlier. So how do you want to recruit people? These are the things that are important to us. And so earlier, as Rachel was saying, and I really agree with this, is that you might have somebody who's a shining star, but they don't fit into that sort of leadership or company or organizational competency set. They're not a fit. And so we need to take a look at that. So it's a way of either matching people when you're bringing them in or getting people to be in the right space while they're in there and giving them something to aspire to. So when you're thinking about that, building that competency framework at the beginning, step back and ask at a high senior management level, what do we want to do with this? What is our goal with this? Because it is a big project and it's a worthwhile project. But if you don't have that high goal, like what is my outcome? In 5 years, we've built this, we want to be here. Then aim towards that and then build your competency framework in that direction. I think that's my thinking.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
So one of the things that really fascinates me about this activity in particular is how you can take what you build as a framework for maybe one business area, one business unit, maybe it's sales, maybe it's, support, and then translate that to another organization because you've really built like these core competencies that have, specific skill sets and needs that help you hire. I mean, that to me, it's like creating that template that allows you to leverage what you gained across all the other organization or business units in your group. And I think that's an interesting topic. Do you guys want to speak to that a little bit? And actually, just letting you know, we actually have a ton of questions in the question queue down here as well, so we can jump in there and take them. So, but yeah, go ahead. We may have answered some of those already. So.
I might start by answering that just by saying that it's probably wise to start with a small group. So pick one that's either most urgent or most willing if this is a new project. And just in that sense of, with working with technology is MVP, even start with something small and test it out. Do a pilot. Because you'll find out a lot of things when you do that, and you might want to adjust. And before you set things in stone, which we don't really do anymore, but because we have to keep moving, as Rachel had mentioned earlier, which I think is really important. But it's to test that out and then see how you do it. The other part of that is I think of competencies as almost a tool of communication. And so once that's been successful or once you've got that, you need some kind of level of internal marketing or communication to let the organization know that we're heading in this direction. This is some of the results that we've gotten from this team. Hurrah, build it up, get marketing involved in that. And then, you've got buy-in and then maybe even ask, hey, I want to do this. And then you start with the next team. And I think that becomes both an organic and structured ways that can fit together as you build forward. And again, I'm going to go back to that buy-in because that becomes more and more important. And Rachel was mentioning this, and in my research and work with this, what I see is we don't want to sort of like push things down onto people anymore. The workplace has really changed. We want people to reach up and grab. And so when you've got good internal communication and buy-in, people are going to say, hey, I want to try that out because I want to learn these skills and I want to get on that program and I want to grow as an employee. That's the ideal situation when you've got people reaching out for it. So I think you really have to kind of like massage your people into enjoying this process, or they'll feel that they've been put on and this might not be successful, as successful as you want. Rachel, what do you think?
Totally agree. buy-in, I think, is always key. And I think that too, one of the ways to work that, I love that, massage your people,
Yeah.
get them excited about it. I think that one of the ways to do that is really to take a look at, what does this mean for you? I mean, we're all into, what does this mean for me? So one of the things that it means is really that a clearer idea of who you are, how you embody the culture of this workplace, and why, to Toddi's point in terms of thinking about moving around, I mean, why any department in this business would want to work with you, would want to have you here. It actually, I think, really makes it makes people more marketable, even just within the business, because everyone's kind of speaking that same language of what success looks like, of what it means to say, yes, this person is functioning at the level that we need them right now for this role. And so it's an easier map to say, more so than I think when I think more task-based of like, I completed 5 e-learnings and they got good reviews. Well, now I completed 7 e-learnings and they got reviews, and 9 that's not necessarily our benchmark for how you're progressing within a role. That output isn't the measure of that. It is that, are you embodying what we want this company to be, and doing things well. How does that actually, Erin, I would love to know from you how, Toddi was talking about at the beginning, how this maps into like an LMS or an HRIS. What are like the technical implications? Because that is completely foreign to me. So like, how does that connect in? I would love to know.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to step back and I'll answer that question, but I want to step back a little bit, because I do believe that competencies and setting up competency framework is a long view, big project, and it's worthwhile. But I think, again, going back to senior management, is this something that we want to do? Like, where are we going to be in 5 years around this? And if there's a goal that fits there, then go forth and do this project, because I think it's worthwhile. And a part of that initial conversation is asking yourself, what technologies do we have on board? And where can we put this? And so I mostly work with a learning management system that has an HR component. And so our clients who use that, the HR component of our learning management system, because it's an enterprise solution, will pick up the competencies because they see it as a whole. And what they're using the learning management system for largely would be internal training at that level. So know your technology. So earlier I was talking about having a competency consultant to assist. That's a very common element that I've been working with. And then you have your technology consultant, which is me at our company. And they'll say, hey, we want to set up competencies, and I'll set up a series of calls with them and go through what they're doing. I want to really say, I think that it's smart to know your technology before you start on your project. Because my work is largely in implementation, I see a couple different scenarios happening. One is people come in with a setup idea, and then they arrive and they see the technology and they're like, I want it to do this. And I have to sit there in that uncomfortable space sometimes and go, well, currently we could do this. And in technology, we often say with time and money, you can do anything. But how much time and money do you want to invest in new technology, building new technology, or acquiring new technology? Or are you willing at this time to phase out and know that today we can do this? Next year, if we invest X in time, we can make this happen as well. So know your outcomes in a vague sense, know your technology, and then start to build into it. So that's at the vaguest high level of planning this out, and get that technology consultant involved. And if possible, get them on the line with your competency consultant so they can talk that language. And then you've got the organization. So it's almost a party of 3 that you're getting together to make that happen. And then you can start crafting your framework in a way that fits the technology that you currently have. Or you can go shopping for technology that suits your requirements. With that, I also want you to think about, again, it's always the end goal. Start with the end in mind. What are you trying to achieve at the end, and how are you going to get to that space? Because again, I see a lot of people getting caught up in the weeds over here in the middle. And I think sometimes my job is to be like, That's great. Let's put that in the parking lot and talk about it next year, because right now we need to stay focused on getting this launched out. So the technology that I work with, and I'll speak with it vaguely because I think it's pretty standard, but you'll have like a competency framework where you can have parent and child competencies. And so when we were talking about frameworks earlier, I see this as very common. So you might have leadership. Leadership may have 5 major components, but under each particular component, there's 5 more. And so you can have a parent competency, and then you can have your child competencies, and each one of those may go to a 3rd level. I think earlier Rachel had mentioned keep it simple in that sense. Don't go for 67, go for 10. Like try something that's manageable at the beginning if you want to grow, move into it. So then you've got these competencies, and you can set up the idea where if I want to be competent in this one main competency, I need to complete all 5 of these to make that happen. And so that is sort of like it aggregates into that completion. Another part of that, so you've got the framework and then you're putting everything in there. In a learning management system, what you can often do is attach a course as an assessment completion. So if I finish this course and I finish this quiz, I have determined that then this competency, you are now competent in this skill. Our enterprise solution also has a lot of space for assessment and management around that, because it's really a relationship between a manager and an employee, more often than not. And so quite often also, because it might be in industry, they have to have an assessment on the field. So it's offline, they'll go out and they'll do the assessment. And then you can also upload a piece of evidence. I'm like really physical here. Put a piece of paper into your computer, but you can upload files or something like that, or videos or images or whatever it is to prove that this person has completed this, and then check off the competency. In our technology, it would be a learning plan. So the competencies would reside there, and then you could check it off. And if you wanted to take that HR component a little bit further, you can swing them down into appraisals and attach goals and everything. So it's actually a really robust system to pull it all together. Now, I'm going to add one more piece to that, just because I think it's a whole story. Because quite often we think, okay, we're done. You're not done. That's only half of the story as far as I'm concerned. The other half of the story is reporting out onto this. So you've got your competencies framework, hooray. You've got your people, and they're showing whether they've done the learning, they've done out in the field, they've done that. Now the organization, so go back to that sort of senior management, why are we doing this? We go back to those guys and say, I've got a report that says on team A, 67% of the people are proficient in these competencies. What's the next step? And now I can then take an action item back into the team and say, we need to train on this and design. And this also goes back to what Rachel was saying earlier, specifically focused training for those people to fill in the gaps. And that's really a big part of what this is all about. Or recruitment. It looks like we need somebody who is good in X or Y. And now I'm going to go to HR and I'm going to hire those people. So the reporting aspect of that technology solution, I think, is essential. What information do you want to get out of it? How does that measure your success, which we've been talking about quite a bit in this hour? And how do you prove that? And then what's the action item out of that? Because it's not like, yay, we're done. You're not done. What's the next step is then, maybe we grow our competencies. You get 100% competent workforce. Awesome. Now grow your competency list and add 5 more. And then you can build it out like that. So that's pretty high level on that. I don't know if there's any more questions that I could speak to more specifically.
I like that. I'll just chime in real quickly. I like that idea of of thinking about how it connects the entire system. That idea of, like, for me as a hiring manager, this is definitely one of the things I do is look at my team, map my team out on our own competency competency map to see, okay, where are my team gaps, so that when I'm recruiting, it really does give me a good sense of not just like, I need someone who knows how to use this piece of technology, that, articulate storyline, or someone who's good at e-learning, whatever. It's a broader way for me to really tap into, okay, these are our strengths. Here are the spaces where we still need that full, we need strength to really map out our whole team. And that's what we want to recruit for. Because in my mind, then, as I'm recruiting for those gaps, those people are going to come in with those competencies and be able to kind of help level up the entire team. And then, of course, hopefully my L&D initiatives match what the competencies are saying is most important for the business. I think that if we're not, it would be very cruel in my mind for a business to create this competency model and really be pushing toward that, especially with rewards, recognition, all of that, and not have the development tools to support it. It's kind of just like giving one half of a puzzle, that if you've got the expectation, you've got to have the support to match that, to help people reach that.
And Rachel, I totally agree with you. And I think this is, in my mind, one of the reasons why you would develop this, but also, to go back to something I'd really want to drive home is make a plan and make a big plan and know what you want to get out of this. And as you start down the journey of building out your competency framework, you'll find, like we have all found here, that it's awesome. And there's a lot you could do with it. And, as I was thinking about it again, you get this reporting out of it that can actually feed back into so many other business units within the system. So if you've got outward marketing, and so I work at a software as a service SaaS model company, and a lot of the clients that I work with might have a similar thing. And so what people want is, I want to know the people that I'm going to work with when I'm working with your company have these skills. And so now you've got a competency framework and training framework, but you also have a way of marketing out to the universe how awesome you and your team are because you are competent in these levels. And in this world, and we've spoken to this a little bit, like relationship is the currency now. And those sort of competencies are often around building good people skills and relationship skills. And so if I'm trying to build relationship with external clients, then I want to know that the people that I'm working with are competent. And so it becomes this really interesting tool that has a lot of spread and a lot of communication out to other places.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting and helpful to me to think about different roles, whether it's job titles, whatever, but where do you land on that competency map? That proficiency for this competency is going to look different at different levels. When I talked about conflict management before, for more of an entry level role, the competency I'm looking for may just be to recognize that conflict is healthy and not shy away from it or push back on it. Maybe that's just like the very beginning. Whereas once I'm getting into my senior leadership, it should be helping others to voice that, seeking out how to healthily manage conflict, and helping others. So, there is like a spectrum, and you can kind of map out at what level do I expect these behaviors? And then it allows people to, if you can really give them some good examples. In my mind, that's also something that I always like to include is, here are competencies, but what does this look like? For us in our business right now, what does this look like? So then it gives me, even as an employee, a chance to say like, okay, I can see that I am right now really in this range. I want to be at this level in a year's time, in 2 years' time, so how am I going to start developing myself to match what the business wants and needs and says, this is what good looks like for us, or this is what great looks like for us. And then I also I just saw a +1 there, and I'm going to do a +1 as well. I think one of the ways that I've been able to have the most impact on my learning and development and training teams has really been around that critical aspect, as you say, of reporting out to those key stakeholders. Because there are oftentimes L&D and operations can sometimes be in a little bit of conflict. Truthfully, they're not, but it can feel that way. And so I think that, being able to, I think one of the best ways for L&D to always continually prove its value is to prove its value, meaning always sharing back out with stakeholders and being honest. I mean, there are times where I have had to share like, hey, when we worked this program out, these were the success measures we were looking for. This is what we were expecting. It's not exactly what happens. We're going to go back, always being clear about what you're doing so that people have that faith in you as a real person. But looking at what does that mean for L&D? How do we show ourselves as true performance consultants to the business? Because I think that, in the past, training tends to be more of like a touchy-feely, like, or they're just taking a test, whatever. And I think we're really moving so far beyond that into competencies, into looking at the behaviors and the business impact that our learning programs are having on with those behaviors that we're driving is so important to share out because that's how you're going to get the buy-in and that's how you're going to get the value to continue moving forward.
Right. And I think that I'm gonna tie that actually directly into the technology as well. So the platform that I'm working with allows you to, so the competencies reside in what we call learning plans. And you can set up learning plans for that the end user, the learner, can determine. So it could be like I'm reaching out and I'm saying, I would like to move into management. I want to learn these skills. And so I can create my own learning plan with those competencies. You can also allow the manager to create that. You can set up both. So, and you can sit down with your manager. Like in our company, we do a one-to-one weekly, and I might say, hey, I want to do this. And so the manager could say, great, I want you to learn these 5 things. So I'm going to create a learning plan for you. And then in the next 6 months, let's see where you get with that. And that can also, like I said earlier, be drawn into an appraisal or your annual review or however that works. So it allows for that sense of either top down, if that's what it needs, or in that sense of like nourishing growth within the company, but also creating an avenue for the learner to self-create their own learning path, which I think is really important in a lot of companies right now. And that sets it up. So I think there was something else, but I've forgotten. Anyways, yeah. So that answers, I think, a little bit what Rachel was saying. Like the technology does match that requirement.
And I love that the way you're setting it up of really giving people the autonomy and the power to say, this is what I want to do. Let me work with my manager. Let me look at the resources that are available to me through the company, training platform and figure out how I'm going to make this happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Questions. Let's see. I might look at this. So Kara asked a question, what is L&D's role in interpreting a competency model to update and refine existing models? I'm just going to think about that for a second. Depending on the company that you're in and how much L&D, like what the impact is. But I think it really is about looking at, it's a communication, it's a collaboration. So you need to work really closely. You want to be able to build the right training materials for the right people at the right time. And I think that breaking out a competency model allows you to do targeted training. And again, having that good reporting element allows you to, part of our solution is a really robust reporting application. And so we've built it out so I can say, show me by department, show me by individual, show me by manager, what these competencies are. And so when I look at that, then I can see that maybe, I'm just going to say an example, maybe sales in this department or in that office isn't doing so well on this one competency, then I might actually develop some materials to send to that sales team over there. And that it's available for everybody. But it's about more targeted training as opposed to what used to be more of like, here's a staff training day and everyone's like, because I don't know, I don't care about operations or I don't care about system, like things that I don't know anything about. I want to know what I need to know. And so I think a good competency framework in learning and development gives you targeted training, which means you have engaged learners. And I think that's the gold in it.
Absolutely. I mean, this is really like adult learning theory 101, right?
Yeah.
You know, like you want people to be interested and invested, and be able to very clearly see how what I am learning in this program is going to affect the job that I'm doing, you know, how I show up in the business, all of this. And so I love that aspect of it, of really being able to clearly tie this course. Not only will, you know, completing this course or following this learning path will not just allow you to, you know, increase your metrics or, you know, whatever these like hard, tangible things are, but there's also that career path benefit to it. Because if you don't have that end-to-end vision, you do lose that buy-in. If I'm going to spend my time and my energy in your L&D courses, and I'm doing something, what's the payoff? What's in it for me? You know, and so I think that is a huge piece of why that end-to-end matters.
Mm-hmm. And to tag on to that, Rachel, I think that again, we're in a work world where we want employees who have more agency, who are think for themselves, who reach out and do things. We just need that. The world requires that more. And so we need to set up competency modeling and L&D offerings that allow people to have that agency and walk away from that job and say, while I was at this role, I learned X, Y, and Z. That factors into job satisfaction very, very highly these days. And so you have that. It is a carrot within itself if it's presented well.
That's a great call out. You know, that it's not just learning how to be successful with the technology and the product and exactly what we're doing right here in this business, but there is that transferable skill set, you know, that I keep going back to conflict management just because it's an easy one, you know, but thinking about that, even, I mean, certain leadership competencies, working with peer communication, you know, all of these things. But if I've got a good attitude about conflict management, and I have some really good tools to be able to speak my mind in a way that fits the culture of the business and everyone is willing to listen, that's something that can absolutely be taken anywhere, you know? And so I think, to your point, like with how, just with where we are in the business, what we expect from people now at work, I think is definitely different. And the fact that we often see people, you know, are not with the same company more than a few years. So if the case, how are we tailoring our programming, our L&D programming, and maybe competency pieces too? How are we tailoring that to the reality of the world, to what people want, so that they can take those skill sets anywhere if they desire?
Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at this.
Me too.
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a new world of work. And the more technical, the more automated and all of that it becomes, the more AI comes into it, then we really need to provide these spaces for people work. And then those soft skills, I think soft skills that are so essential to the workplace, conflict management is really, really important. And that when people when you're recruiting people, you can say, like, we've got this great training program and we're going to get you going. And again, sort of back to that reporting. And the idea is that we've also developed like the ability for like the learner to have this sort of report that belongs to them now. And when they walk away, they're like, I accomplished this. So is it either an exit interview or moving into the next place? It really sort of bolsters up that company. And I see a lot of tech companies, and I'm in Vancouver, and there's a lot of tech companies here, and recruitment is big. And they want people to come in. And so they invite people. I go to a lot of meetups and I get to see a lot of different offices, but they have their values quite often on the wall. So these competencies may be like a core value set of the company. And not only am I going to learn about that sort of in my L&D, but I also see it on the wall. And so others come into the office, they're like, oh, this is what this company is all about. And it's loud and proud. And it's really, really good. And it's that constant sort of knowledge boosting idea that, you know, you've got out of L&D, but I see it not just online, but I see it everywhere where I go. And that helps people see, I understand what this company is about, and I want to work with these people. So you can really draw it out as well to make that happen. Oh, I think we just lost Rachel for a minute there. Toddi, I can't hear you. I think, are we, hang on a sec. Rachel, are you back? There you are.
Am I back?
Okay.
Yeah,
you're
I disappeared.
Oh yeah, Toddi, I think you're on mute, maybe, or no, you've. Oh
Just
dear.
not working. And I lost the last 30 seconds. So I'm not really sure where we ended up.
I know I got distracted by looking at. Yeah, just sort of the idea that we can pull those competencies out and it becomes part of the culture, sort of circling back around to that. Yeah.
Yes. So that I was going to dovetail on that as well, because that, as we were building, so when I came into my current role, there was not a lot of learning technology yet. So we're actually in the process right now of implementing our first LMS. And one of the things that I spoke to my team about that was really important to me was that I think the reporting function of thinking about having a clear and nice transcript that follows the employees, so that, and obviously that wouldn't necessarily be outside of the business, but thinking about staying within the company, moving laterally, moving up, whatever it is, but being able to say, like, I took these courses and these are going to be applicable to my success here no matter where I am. And also, even just as a way, it can be somewhat of a differentiator when you're looking to bring in new people into a department to see, okay, let's look at the transcript. Let's see, how have you taken advantage of what L&D is offering for you? Mm-hmm. I'm looking. Yes. So I like that. With the transcript, we're actually utilizing some different certifications to almost, I think, to what you're talking about, this micro-credential. So we're looking at a shared services model. So there are times in our business, there's some seasonality to it. So there are times when one team, say for 2 to 3 months, needs an extra 20 people that they don't need the rest of the year. So how can L&D support in that with creating proactively, working with that team to create a little certification or micro-credential, that says, I've learned the basics of this. I'm the right fit. I already have a sense of what we're talking about for you to be able to take me over onto your team with minimal additional training. Shows interest. It shows competency. All of that. So for me, I think that is going to be something that's going to be really important for us to be pushing in our department around this business, because it is new here. This idea of your transcript really being a highlight of who you are in the company and what you can do.
Mm-hmm. And to go along with that, just sort of micro credentials can give you that sense of not full gamification, but the idea of, like, there's many rewards as you go along, and so there's a sense of leveling up, achieving. And I think that's important too. I love getting badges. I'm a little bit of a nerd like that, but I totally love, I got a badge, and it doesn't matter how old I am. Like, it works for me, and so it's got to work for other people. And I think that when I get like a little certificate or something, I feel proud of myself at Badge Life. Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's what we're in the midst of right now, is designing our badges. We start marketing, so they'll look really cool, making stickers, all sorts of stuff, to really get everyone pumped up about what this could mean for them.
Yeah. And that's what it is. That's that company culture. That's like, we together are building this up together. And it's like, hey, like, marketing's got 87%. Let's make that 95 by the end of this year. And then that's a way of also setting concrete goals and achieving them. And getting people to work together towards that. And I think that people crave that. A lot of people do. So that works to achieve those original goals that we're talking at the outset. Like the company has a goal. How do we trickle that down to the rank and file on the floor to make sure that they're also getting that buy-in and saying, yeah, I want that. And I'm going to get it through my badges and my micro-credentials and my certificates, and feeling proud of myself for what I've done. And having the language, I am competent in X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
So, oh, I think we're getting cut out soon. That's too bad. I've been enjoying this conversation a lot. Thanks, everybody.
Yes. Okay, we will come back, please.
Yeah, I will absolutely be back. I want to
see if Toddi can get the sound going.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so I wonder if maybe Toddi won't be able to say goodbye, but we can see that. Thank you so much for having me on today. I really enjoyed meeting Rachel and Toddi, and your great questions. I have such an engaged audience. I really appreciate that so much. So what a pleasure to be here today.
Agree. And it's really cool to see different, people in different geographic locations, different areas of business, all of that stuff. And show, I think it to me is one of those really nice benefits, like for me with L&D and thinking about how like kind of brings everybody together, and that there are certain things that have to happen very functionally for a business. And I definitely get that, but there are also so many things that are really just so broad and needed. When we think about competencies and in the ways that L&D can really support that, it makes me so excited.
Yeah. Awesome. All right.
We taking a break?